Imagine stepping into a space where you believe you're entirely by yourself. No cameras, no onlookers, no one to assess or scrutinize your every action. In that instant of perceived isolation, who are you? How do you carry yourself? How do you inhale and exhale? What look appears on your face when you think no one is observing? In that individual, that unfiltered version of yourself is nearer to your essence than any act you've ever put on for spectators. But here's what might unsettle you about what I'm going to reveal tonight. Even in that vacant space, you still have an observer, the most exacting, most severe, most unrelenting spectator you'll ever encounter. And that spectator is you. I uncovered this reality not in front of applauding crowds or film cameras, but in the quiet of my own practice space at 3 in the morning. I had been rehearsing for hours, refining skills that would never be witnessed by another person. No pupils to awe, no mentors to please, no cameras capturing. Just me, the training equipment, and the reverberation of my own actions in the shadows. As I launched a strike into that quiet, I realized something that halted me. I was still acting. I was still, even alone, even in total seclusion. I was staging a show for myself, embodying the role of what I believed a martial artist should be. You do this as well, don't you? Even when you're completely alone, you catch yourself posturing, correcting your stance, rehearsing dialogues, practicing looks in the mirror. You've grown so used to having an audience that you've forgotten how to exist without one. But the most sorrowful part isn't that you perform for others, had to perform for others. The most sorrowful part is that you've become a stranger to your own genuine self. You've been on stage so long that you've forgotten there was ever a time when you weren't acting. Let me transport you to a moment that altered everything for me. I was 7 years old, sitting alone in my father's office while he was at the concert hall. No one was home, no one was observing, and for the first time in my young life, I felt the peculiar liberty of complete solitude. In that moment, I began to move. Not to the stiff forms I'd been instructed in, not the disciplined poses expected of me, but something else entirely. Something that emerged from deep within, something that felt like liquid flame coursing through my small body. I moved like water carving its path through stones, like wind swaying grass, like something alive and untamed and completely my own. Then I heard footsteps in the corridor. Instantly, I reverted to the posture I'd been taught, the stance that was anticipated, the role of the good son, the disciplined learner. My father entered the room, smiled approvingly at my proper form, and continued on his way. But in that shift from genuine movement to expected performance, I felt something perish inside me. I felt the confinement of other people's expectations enclosing around my spirit. And I realized, even at 7 years old, that I had just chosen security over truth, approval over authenticity. How many times have you made that same choice? How many times have you felt that untamed, genuine energy stirring within you, only to suppress it the moment you sensed someone might be watching? You've trained yourself so well to be what others expect that you've lost touch with what you actually are beneath all those layers of performance. But here's what's even more unsettling. You've become so skilled at this act that you deceive even yourself. You've been wearing disguises for so long that you've forgotten what your real face looks like. The truth is, most individuals live their entire lives as actors in a play they never auditioned for, speaking lines they never wrote, playing characters they never chose to be. They wake up each morning, check their reflection, and ask not, "Who am I today?" but, "Who do I need to be today?" They dress not for themselves, but for their audience. They speak not their truth, but the words they think others want to hear. They move through their days like performers on a stage, constantly aware of the spotlight, constantly adjusting their performance based on who's watching. The greatest tragedy isn't that you perform for others. The greatest tragedy is what happens when the curtain falls, when the audience goes home, when you're finally alone with yourself. In those moments of silence, you're confronted with a stranger. You sit in your empty house and realize you don't know who you are when no one is watching. You've become so skilled at being what others want that you've lost the ability to be what you are. I remember the night this reality hit me with devastating clarity. I was in my Hong Kong apartment, having just finished a film that would make me famous throughout Asia. The crew had gone home, the interviews were done, the cameras were off. I stood in my bathroom, looking at my reflection in the harsh fluorescent light, and I realized I didn't recognize the man staring back at me. Not because fame had changed me, but because I had finally stopped performing long enough to see who I really was underneath all the roles I'd been playing. That man in the mirror was tired. Not just physically exhausted from the demands of filmmaking, but spiritually drained from the constant performance. He had opinions that never made it past his lips because they might not be popular. He had dreams that remained hidden because they might seem foolish. He had fears he never acknowledged because they might make him appear weak. He had a wildness, a creative fire that he kept carefully contained because it might be too much for others to handle. In that moment of brutal honesty, I realized I had been living my life as an edited version of myself, constantly cutting out the parts that might not play well to an audience. The most dangerous thing about living for an audience is that it's addictive. The applause feels good. The approval is intoxicating. The feeling that you're giving people what they want creates a false sense of purpose and connection. But like any addiction, it demands more and more of you while giving less and less back. You find yourself constantly escalating your performance, becoming more and more extreme in your attempts to maintain the attention and approval of your audience. You lose yourself in the character you're playing, forgetting that the character was supposed to serve you, not the other way around. I see this everywhere I look. In the martial arts world, I watch students who move beautifully when they're being observed, but lose all flow and power when they think they're alone. In Hollywood, I work with actors who are brilliant on camera, but seem to disappear entirely when the cameras stop rolling. In everyday life, I meet people who are charming and confident in social situations, but become anxious and uncertain the moment they're by themselves. They've become so dependent on external validation that they've lost the ability to validate themselves. But here's what I discovered in my years of training, both in martial arts and in life. Your most powerful moments, your most creative breakthroughs, your most authentic expressions, they don't happen when you're performing for an audience. They happen in the spaces between performances. They happen in the early morning hours when you're alone with your thoughts, fall with your thoughts. They happen in the quiet moments when you stop trying to be impressive and start being honest. They happen when you finally have the courage to exist without an audience. Think about the last time you were truly alone. Not just physically alone, but mentally and emotionally alone. When was the last time you weren't performing for someone, even if that someone was just the imaginary audience in your head? When was the last time you moved your body without thinking about how it looked? When was the last time you spoke words without considering how they sounded? When was the last time you simply existed without editing yourself for public consumption? For most people, the answer is never, or so long ago that they can't remember. We've created a world where privacy has become so rare that we've forgotten how to use it. We've become so accustomed to being observed, evaluated, and judged that we've lost the ability to simply... We pull out our phones to document every moment, turning even our private experiences into content for our audience. We've become directors of our own lives, constantly thinking about how our story will play to others rather than simply living it for ourselves. But I want you to understand something profound about authenticity. Your real power, your unique contribution to this world, doesn't come from your performed self. It comes from the person you are when no one is watching. It comes from the thoughts you think when you're not trying to impress anyone. It comes from the way you move when you're not concerned about grace. It comes from the words you speak when you're not worried about being eloquent. Your authentic self isn't a polished performance. It's a raw, unedited expression of your deepest truth. I learned this lesson most powerfully during my development of Jeet Kune Do. For years, I had been training in traditional martial arts, always conscious of proper form, always aware of how my techniques looked to my instructors and fellow students. I was performing martial arts rather than living them. But one day, during a particularly intense training session, I forgot about everything I'd been taught. I forgot about proper stance, correct timing, and traditional techniques. I simply responded to my opponent with pure, unfiltered instinct. In that moment of complete authenticity, I discovered something entirely new. I discovered my own way of fighting, my own expression of martial arts. And that discovery only happened because I stopped performing and started being. This is why I say that a man is truly himself when he has no audience. It's not that audiences are evil or that you should never perform for others. It's that your relationship with yourself must be stronger than your relationship with your audience. You must know who you are when the curtain falls, because that's who you'll have to live with for the rest of your life. The applause will fade, the audience will go home, but you'll still be there, alone with your thoughts, your dreams, your fears, and your truth. The most courageous thing you can do is to spend time with yourself without trying to entertain, impress, or improve yourself. Just to be present with who you are in this moment, without judgment, without editing, without performance. To sit with your thoughts without trying to make them more interesting. To feel your emotions without trying to make them more appropriate. To experience your desires without trying to make them more acceptable. To acknowledge your fears without trying to make them more heroic. This kind of raw honesty with yourself is terrifying because it strips away all the comfortable illusions you've built about who you are. You've built about who you are. It reveals the gap between your public persona and your private reality. It shows you all the ways you've been lying to yourself and others. But it also reveals something else. It reveals your authentic power, your genuine creativity, your real voice. And that discovery is worth any temporary discomfort the process might bring. I want to share with you a practice that transformed my relationship with myself and my relationship with truth. Every morning before I interact with another human being, before I check any messages or read any news, I spend 30 minutes alone with myself, not meditating, not exercising, not working on any project, just sitting with who I am in that moment. I notice my thoughts without trying to change them. I feel my emotions without trying to fix them. I acknowledge my energy level without trying to modify it. I simply exist without agenda, without performance, without audience. In those 30 minutes, I often discover things about myself that surprise me. Emotions I didn't know I was carrying. Thoughts I didn't realize I was thinking. Desires I had been suppressing. Fears I had been avoiding. Creativity that had been waiting for space to emerge. It's like having a daily meeting with my authentic self, checking in with who I really am beneath all the roles I play throughout the day. You would be amazed at how different you feel when you start your day from a place of authentic self-awareness rather than from a place of anticipated performance. When you know who you are before you step onto the stage of your life, you can choose your performances consciously rather than being controlled by them. You can play your roles without losing yourself in them. You can interact with your audience without becoming dependent on their approval. But I must warn you, this practice of authentic solitude will change you. It will make you less willing to betray yourself for the comfort of others. It will make you less interested in playing roles that don't serve your truth. It will make you more selective about the audiences you choose to perform for. It will make you more conscious of when you're being real and when you're being fake. Many people avoid this kind of authentic solitude because they're afraid of what they might discover about themselves. They're afraid they might not like who they are when no one is watching. They're afraid they might be boring or ordinary or flawed. But here's what I've discovered through years of this practice. Your authentic self isn't boring. It's the most interesting thing about you. Your authentic self isn't ordinary. It's completely unique. Your authentic self isn't flawed. It's perfectly imperfect in exactly the way it needs to be. The person you are when no one is watching isn't a lesser version of your performed self. It's a more complete version. It includes all the parts you usually edit out. The uncertainty that makes you human. The vulnerability that makes you relatable. The wildness that makes you creative. The softness that makes you loving. The darkness that makes you complex. The light that makes you powerful. When you stop performing and start being, you don't become less. You become more. You become more. You become whole. This is why authentic solitude is so transformative. It's not about isolation or withdrawal from the world. It's about developing a strong enough relationship with yourself that you can engage with the world from a place of fullness rather than emptiness, from authenticity rather than performance, from choice rather than compulsion. From choice rather than compulsion. When you know who you are, when no one is watching, you can choose who to be when everyone is watching. I remember filming a scene for Enter the Dragon where I had to deliver a philosophical dialogue about the nature of fighting, shu fighting. Take after take, I delivered the lines as written, hitting all the right emotional notes, giving the director what he wanted. But something felt off. During a break, I stepped away from the cameras, away from the crew, and found a quiet corner where I could be alone with the material. The material. In that solitude, I connected with the truth of what I was trying to express. I felt the philosophy in my body, not just my mind. I experienced the emotion behind the words, not just the performance of them. When I returned to the scene, what emerged was completely different. It was still the same dialogue, but it was coming from a real place rather than a performed place. And you can see the difference in the final film. This is the power of authentic solitude. It's not about becoming a hermit or avoiding human connection. It's about developing such a strong relationship with your own truth that everything you do in the world becomes an expression of that truth, rather than a performance designed to get something from others. When you know who you are, when no one is watching, every interaction becomes an opportunity for authentic expression rather than manipulative performance. But developing this relationship with your authentic self requires courage. Courage. It requires the willingness to face parts of yourself you might not like. It requires the strength to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to fix or change it. It requires the patience to get to know yourself as you actually are, rather than as you think you should be. And it requires the commitment to honor what you discover, even when it conflicts with what others expect from you. The most profound realization I've had through this practice is that the person I am when no one is watching is not separate from the person I am when everyone is watching. They're the same person, just expressed differently depending on the context. The goal isn't to eliminate all performance from your life. The goal is to make sure that all your performances are expressions of your authentic self rather than betrayals of it. To choose your roles consciously rather than being unconsciously controlled by them. When you achieve this integration, something magical happens. You stop feeling exhausted by social interaction because you're no longer maintaining a false persona. You stop feeling anxious about being discovered because there's nothing fake to hide. You stop feeling empty when you're alone because you actually enjoy your own company. You stop feeling dependent on others' approval because you've learned to approve of yourself. You become like water, able to take any shape while never losing your essential nature. This is what I mean when I say that a man is truly himself when he has no audience. It's not about avoiding audiences or living in isolation. It's about developing such a strong sense of self that your audience becomes irrelevant to your essential being. You can perform for others without losing yourself in the performance. You can give people what they want without betraying what you are. You can be generous with your energy without depleting your essence. But this level of authentic self-awareness requires practice. It requires daily time alone with yourself without agenda or distraction. It requires honest self-observation without judgment or criticism. It requires the courage to feel whatever you're feeling without immediately trying to change it. It requires the wisdom to distinguish between who you are and who you think you should be. And it requires the strength to choose authenticity, even when performance would be easier or more profitable. I challenge you to begin this practice tonight. After everyone else in your house has gone to sleep, After you've turned off all your devices, after you've stepped away from all external input and stimulation, sit alone with yourself for just 10 minutes. Don't try to meditate or improve yourself or solve any problems. Just be present with who you are in that moment. Notice what thoughts arise when you're not trying to think interesting thoughts. Feel what emotions emerge when you're not trying to feel appropriate emotions. Experience what energy is present when you're not trying to be energetic or calm or any particular way. You might be surprised by what you discover. You might find that you're sadder than you realized, or angrier, or more afraid. You might also find that you're stronger than you thought, or more creative, or more peaceful. You might discover desires you've been ignoring, dreams you've been suppressing, or truths you've been avoiding. Whatever you find, receive it without judgment. This is who you are when no one is watching. This is your authentic self, waiting to be acknowledged and honored. Over time, as you develop comfort with this practice of authentic solitude, you'll begin to notice changes in how you show up in the world. You'll become less reactive to others' opinions because you'll have a stronger relationship with your own. You'll become less desperate for approval because you'll be learning to approve of yourself. You'll become less exhausted by social interaction because you'll no longer be maintaining a false persona. You'll become more creative because you'll have access to parts of yourself you usually keep hidden. You'll become more peaceful because you'll no longer be at war with your own truth, because you'll no longer be at war. The path to authentic self-expression doesn't lead away from the world. It leads deeper into your own truth, and from that place of deep self-knowledge, you can engage with the world more powerfully than ever before. When you know who you are when no one is watching, you can choose who to be when everyone is watching. When you're comfortable with your own company, you can offer that same comfort to others. When you've learned to love your authentic self, you can love others authentically as well. This is the ultimate freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to be whoever you are. Not the freedom from all audiences, but the freedom to engage with audiences from a place of choice rather than compulsion. Not the freedom from performance, but the freedom to make all your performances expressions of your truth rather than betrayals of it. When you achieve this freedom, you discover that your authentic self isn't a limitation to overcome. It's a power to express. It's not something to hide from the world. It's something to share with the world. Remember, the person you are when no one is watching isn't your secret self that you need to keep hidden. It's your true self that the world is waiting to meet. Your authenticity isn't a liability. It's your greatest asset. Your vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's your deepest strength. Your humanity isn't something to transcend. It's something to embrace and express. The world doesn't need another perfect performance. It needs your authentic expression. It needs the unique way you see reality when you're not trying to see it the right way. It needs the particular way you feel things when you're not trying to feel them appropriately. It needs the specific way you create when you're not trying to create something impressive. It needs the distinctive way you love when you're not trying to love correctly. So I leave you with this challenge. Tonight, when you're completely alone, ask yourself this question: who am I when no one is watching? And then have the courage to sit with whatever answer emerges. Don't judge it. Don't try to improve it. Don't attempt to make it more interesting or more appropriate. Just acknowledge it, honor it, and begin the lifelong practice of bringing that authentic self into the world, not as a performance, but as an expression. Because that person, that real, unedited, authentic you, is exactly who the world needs you to be. The audience will always be there in one form or another, but your relationship with yourself must be stronger than your relationship with any audience. When you achieve that strength, you discover that you don't lose your ability to connect with others. You actually gain the ability to connect with them authentically. You don't become less interesting to watch. You become more real to experience. You don't diminish your impact on the world. You amplify it by bringing your full truth to everything you do. Be water, my friend. But more importantly, be yourself, especially when no one is watching. Because that's when you're most truly alive.